So as for today's lecture, we will be looking into the future challenges in transportation infrastructure, followed by energy, technology, and sustainability. Alright guys, so let's start with the lesson by looking back into the history. Between the year 1980s to 1990s, the transportation was less expensive. And at that point, having transportation improves the productivity and economic growth generally. So to simplify, these two factors has contributed the economic growth due to the inexpensive fuel and lack of competition. However, if you look into this environment, the time has completely changed. The fuel price has gone up, which has increased, and the capacity of motor carrier has reduced. And this is due to driver hour restriction. This regulation was only introduced few years back. It's not just about the trucks I'm speaking about. The other modes like air freight has also similar challenges due to the cost rise in fuel. Let's now move on with the congestion and transportation infrastructure. Well, most of you would have experienced and feel frustrated due to traffic. As any of you have considered looking into the total cost due to this traffic? So as you could see on my slide here, we'll be looking from two perspectives. We have got social cost, we have got business cost. Let's start with social cost. Let's take an example. The cost of an extra fuel due to getting stuck in traffic. Not forgetting there's also a cost of personal time lost. So you could do something else that could add on your income instead of getting stuck in traffic. So this cost I'm referring to is known as social cost. To simplify, social cost is referring to reduce the opportunity for leisure, reduce time with family, and inconvenience for friends and family. So well, let's now look into the perspective of business. The cost of congestion is real and much more important. For instance, Nike estimated that they have spent an additional of 4 million per week in order to carry an extra of 7 to 14 days of inventory. And this is to compensate for congestion delays. To simplify this for you, due to the congestion, there'll be an increase in inventory for the business. There'll be an increase in lead time. So it's not going to be convenient. You're not going to be able to receive your goods or deliver your goods on time. And there'll be increase in the cost to carriers, for instance, a rise in fuel cost, a rise in freight rates, and also additional labor cost. Moving on to my next slide, we'll be looking into railways. There's a high demand for trailer on flat car and container on flat car, and this is so general. And it is now a source of income or source of revenue for most businesses. And as to make it more efficient, the Union Pacific Railroad has also initiated a double track program. This double track program is an additional of another track to be built in, which is more cheaper than adding on lanes on highways. And if you look into what would the challenge be, the actual challenge of this idea is that the idea of redeveloping is completely ignored by the political parties. Moving on to the seaport infrastructure, as mentioned in my previous chapter, the challenge waterways are due to flood, ice, and other storm-related disruption. And one of the main challenges that we could look into this lecture would be the larger the vessel, it has caused some capacity and congestion problems in general. And this large vessel that I'm speaking about had to take a longer route, which adds additional miles to their journey. And the other challenge that we could look into is due to the seaport in relevance to environmental factor. For instance, discharge of various garbage and trash that may be thrown overboard. If you're looking into a port that's well maintained, would be Port of Melbourne. It's controlled in terms of geographical features, and this port here, Port of Melbourne, takes full consideration of environmental impacts, as this port only takes up a maximum size of 5,000 containers. Let's now move on with the next slide, which is go green with transportation. Starting with the carbon footprint debate. This debate is due to the assumption that going green would mean increased cost to the business. I'm pretty sure you have heard this before. But however, the government has put on pressure on both the shipper and carrier. So look into it. The pressure is not just on the shipper but also on the carrier to initiate effort to eliminate pollution and also to reduce the carbon footprints. But again, some business found that they could actually reduce carbon footprint and still lower their cost with their initiative to lower the negative impact on the environment. Let's now look into some motivation factors to go green. We have got number one, to improve fuel efficiency. Number two, corporate responsibility. The third bit is on a desire to increase or maintain brand reputation, which is quite important factor if you look into this environment. Following on with that, competitive pressure and internal and external stakeholder pressure. And the final bit we have got is on rising energy cost and regulatory pressure. However, these forces are also being against the idea of going green, which includes the furling, as you could see on my right hand side on my slide here. Starting with redeveloping of new technology had made the production of oil much more cheaper, and knowing this price level were much more lower with the initiative of going green. Moving on, the idea of going green is also being against by the lean and just-in-time manufacturing. So having just-in-time, for an example, it focuses only on demand-driven supply chain, where the transportation do not give any importance to capacity utilization. So we look back into what we have learned before. Just-in-time normally focuses on improving customer service and lowering inventory cost. And not forgetting the third bit, which is on packaging. The idea of using large packaging to fill the transportation equipment, the warehouse space, and the retailer shelf more quickly than necessary. Back to what we have covered before, the excess packaging is usually used to reduce the damage. But however, this packaging usually ends up wastage and obviously it does increase the logistic cost. Moving on to the next slide, we are going to look into the Go Green initiatives. We have got 6 points here that I'm going to go through with you guys briefly. The first bit is starting on reduced packaging. Following on with that, reduce water content in products. Moving on, cost reduction through fuel efficiency, clean fuel, load consolidation, that will be more encouraged. And the final bit is in terms of network mileage optimization. What I would like to highlight here is that in order to have this initiative to take place, you have to use an appropriate allocation of customers to each distribution center. So if you have got a proper allocation that's being done, then there'll be an improvement in terms of transportation efficiency, there'll be a reduction in total mileage, and obviously there'll be a better customer service that could be provided. So just to sum it up, these are the green initiatives that you could look into for businesses. Let's now look into the fuel cost and consumption. The instability in fuel price has been a challenge for most carriers in terms of their cost and profit. And this is only for one reason. This is due to the instability carriers. They have to insert a fuel surcharge into their price structure. And they do this because they have to protect their financial viability, even in case the fuel price increases. Let me just simplify this for you. In terms of the fuel cost and consumption, it can also be manipulated by the political force, the first bit, the market manipulation in terms of the supply and demand cost pressure. Let's now look into the response, a carrier's response of fuel issues and sustainability. Let's start with the term fuel surcharge, the first bit. In response to lower fuel costs, the fuel surcharge is one of the most common strategy that is being used in order to increase revenue. And this surcharge has now become a practice. It is becoming a practice for all the transportation modes in recent years. And it's used to negotiate between the carrier and between the shipper. So having this contract, the carrier contract at the moment has become more sophisticated. And the fuel saving is also possible to trucks and ocean by only reducing the speed. Yes, it does give a negative impact towards customer service in long run. And moving on, in response to fuel costs, the practice of network rationalization is being formed. In simple terms, it means reducing services on unprofitable routes. Think about it. By not having any service that's being provided, for routes that's not going to be profitable. That could be a problem in long run. Following on with that, the next point is on the fuel efficiency can also be improved with the equipment modernization. So for instance, using electric hybrids instead, or maybe a lighter weight equipment for an example. So by having these equipments in place, the fuel efficiency could also be achieved. And one final point I would like to highlight before we end today's lecture is on technology. So we know how important is technology in order to manage, in order to control the equipment. So having this technology in place, most businesses are able to provide visibility of assets and also related information in order to improve the operation and ability to track and trace on real-time informations.